Great. Yep. Good morning, 11 o'clock, first Sunday of the month, which means it's time for Chai and Wine. So welcome to you all watching online from the Prithvi Theatre, where we have yet another episode of Chai and Wine, this time on a very interesting topic of sleep. Before I introduce Nitin Chouhan, who will be giving the talk today or conducting the session, for those who are watching for the first time, just in case, Chai and Wine is a TIFR outreach event that happens on the first Sunday of every month at Prithvi Theatre, the third Sunday at Ruparel College in Matunga, and if a month has a fifth Sunday, we are live from a lab at TIFR, so that's an online session. And just to tell you that the next session happening here, 5th of November, will be on physics in the movies, or the lack of physics in the movies, whichever way it is. And you'll see how people go through windows and buses jump and all that stuff. Before that, the October 15th, which is 2 weeks from now at Ruparel College, we're going to have a fun look into the world of fungi. You know, all the way from mushrooms to the stuff that grows on bread if you leave it outside. It's a wonderful world out there, and we're going to have Sarita tell us about that. And then we'll be back here for the Chai and Wine next month. Before that, we will have a 5th October does have 5 Sundays, and we will be live from a lab on the last Sunday of October as well. So to get to today's session on sleep, I hope you've had, you know, doesn't matter whether you've slept well or not, the expert is here, you can ask all your questions. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Nitin Singh Chouhan, one of our newer faculty members in the Department of Biological Sciences at TIFR. He did his schooling in Mumbai, master's from IISER Pune, went to Germany for a PhD, looking at sleep rhythms not in humans, but in fruit flies. Then he went for a postdoc in the US at UPenn, where he was looking at the connections between sleep and memory. And we were lucky to get him back to TIFR, and he set up a lab where he is investigating sleep, memory, and things like this, again in fruit flies. Yeah. So the hero of most of biology is fruit flies. So apparently we are just big fruit flies. Whatever happens there is equally applicable to us. So over to you, Nitin. And remember that because you've come here, you get a lot of chance to ask questions after chai, and you can also ask urgent questions. Please put up your hand. I'll look at you. I'll do it. Online audience, you must put your questions on the chat. We have people monitoring the chat, and hopefully we will, you know, take your questions either during the talk or after the session is over. Okay. Sorry, online audience, you don't get chat. Okay. On that note, over to you.
So
now you should share screen. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see the dialog box. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope I'm audible at the back. I almost feel like a performer, so I'll try to keep you entertained, but I don't guarantee that. There will be few facts which would be hard-hitting, but I hope you do take away a few things by the end of this session. Thank you so much, Arnav. I'm Nitin, a new faculty member at TIFR Mumbai, and I'm broadly interested in how behaviors are generated and executed. So, for instance, why do animals feel hungry? And if they are feeling hungry, how do they approach food? So before I start today's session, I would like to pique your interest in a new behavior treatment that we have developed, and hope some of you might be interested in it. So this is an amazing breakthrough, on which a new treatment is based. It enhances your memory, makes you more creative, makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim and lower food cravings. Also helps you fight infection, cold, flu, etc. And in the long term as well, you are better served if you do opt here. So show of hands if any one of you are interested in this. Okay, very few. So people seem hesitant. So there are no pills. I'm not going to put injections, so you don't have to come to a clinic. You just need to go back home, get into your bed, and try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every day. If you're able to do that, then most of these benefits you will be able to avail. So as you can appreciate, sleep is incredibly important, and but majority of us do not get enough of it. So today's session will be about sleep and its functions, particularly memory, and how especially these two aspects are connected, how sleep is important for you to form new memories and even get rid of memory that is not really relevant. So before I move forward, I just wanted another question to ask. How many of you actually get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night? Okay, not even 50% of the room. Okay, let's look at some numbers to see that further. So researchers did this really a youth study across countries where they used activity monitors to look at sleep in individuals. And what they found was typically in rich countries, people tend to sleep about 7 hours on average. And this is the lower limit of what is essentially required. 7 to 8 hours is what generally is recommended for humans. But if we start looking at where we stand here, well, way below at number 33, with just 6.4 hours of sleep every night, which is more than 30 minutes lower than what is the lower limit of recommended sleep. Now, another aspect is if you look at sleep during the weekend, there is a sharp uptick. So even though weekdays we tend to sleep somewhere around 6.9 to 7 hours in these countries, during weekend, that sleep typically goes up. But if you again see in India, it doesn't look like there's much change. In terms of sleep that we are getting, it's pretty similar whether it's weekday or a weekend. The other aspect that this study pointed out was when we go to bedtime and when we wake up. So again, countries in which people are getting about 7 hours of sleep, they are going to bed earlier than 11 in the night, and then waking up around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. And the countries that are getting lesser sleep, people are going to bed later. Like in India, people on average are going to bed after midnight and getting up around 7, just after 7. I don't know what happened to Russians here. They tend to go sleep really late and wake up and somehow get 8 hours. But except that outlier, it generally seems to be the case here.
This does not count sleeping in lectures.
Yeah, so this is only the nighttime sleep. The siesta sleep, the sleep that you get in the afternoons or even falling asleep. That is kind of making up for what you're not able to get properly, but the afternoon sleep has its own benefits. But overall, if you're getting that 7 to 8 hours of sleep, typically it happens that you're going to bed earlier in the night and then waking up also earlier. So as a behavior, sleep is not unique to humans. As you might have observed, many animals do show a sleep-like behavior. And that is, again, true across the animal kingdom. But the time of sleep that animals obtain varies. So humans get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. But there are animals like brown bats there who sleep for about 20 to 24 hours in the day. So they only wake up, eat, and go back to sleep. So the most of the time they're just sleeping. But there are also animals like horses that are sleeping just for 2 to 3 hours every night. And giraffe had this peculiar behavior where they just take these 5-minute naps and consolidate it into just 30 minutes, and that's enough for them. when I was looking at this slide, I was noticing that most of the vegetarian animals are sleeping less, while non-vegetarian ones are carnivores, essentially, are sleeping more. And in flies, we do find similar behavior, but I'll come to that. What this essentially indicates that sleep seems to be really important because many animals across the kingdom are exposing themselves to being vulnerable because they cannot protect themselves against predators when they are essentially sleeping, but they are still executing, they're still showing this behavior. So the first fundamental question, how do we know when to sleep, right? What is triggering that sleep onset in humans or across animals? So there are essentially two processes. The first is circadian rhythms. So because of the rotation of the Earth on its axis, the one half of the planet is always in front of the sun while the other is away. Because of this, there are natural light-dark cycles coming into the picture. And creatures have developed their own internal clocks to synchronize their behavior to these external light-dark cycles. So there are certain regions in the brain that take this light-dark information and then synchronize all the other organs in your body to match their activity to these light-dark cycles. So some of those are listed here. Across the day, your system is being good at dividing its activities across the 24-hour cycle. Now, I would like to point your attention to melatonin. Some of you may have heard of it. So melatonin secretion essentially begins late in the evening, and this is what we can characterize as a darkness signaling hormone. So the moment melatonin secretion begins, your body starts realizing the sun is down, it's getting darker. And it peaks around 2 a.m., where the deepest stages of sleep are experienced. And then it starts going down such that by the time sun rises up again, your system had got rid of most of melatonin. So based on this cycle of melatonin across the night, your system essentially recognizes that it's time to go to sleep and it's time to now wake up. So that's one of the factors that is determining your sleep. Yes?
What is
Okay. So sleep is a behavior, it's general. Okay. Oh, so one of the questions is, what is sleep? So it can be characterized as something where we lose our senses. So external stimulus can no longer activate or bring us up. It requires a little bit more. So the threshold has increased. So if I am calling someone, if they are just lying down, they will get up. But if they are sleeping, then a more stronger stimulus is required. I may even have to go and shake them up to get them up. So that's a state which is different from a normal lying down. And it's also different from states like hibernation or even death, where you cannot get out reversibly. So somewhere in between, that's what we would characterize as sleep. Yeah. Okay. So one of the factors is circadian rhythms. The other factor is sleep drive, or essentially sleep pressure. So when you wake up in the morning, the sleep pressure is at its lowest. But as you keep yourself up throughout the day, it builds up. So by the time it's night, the sleep pressure at its maximum, which is again triggering you to go to bed and fall asleep. Now, the chemical responsible for this is called adenosine. So in the morning, the levels of adenosine are really low, but as you keep yourself up throughout the day, the levels of adenosine keep on increasing, such that by the time it's the nighttime, those levels are so high that they are now communicating with neurons in your brain that it's time to go to sleep. And once you do fall asleep, the adenosine levels start going down. So now I would like to talk about caffeine. I hope many of you have experienced this with coffee and tea. When you drink them, you can stay up a bit longer, right? Even if the sleep pressure is a little high. The reason that happens is the caffeine in coffee, tea, or cocoa has a very similar structure as adenosine. So it kind of gets in between neurons and adenosine. It blocks this communication. So adenosine now no longer is able to tell your neurons, your brain, that it's time to fall asleep because the caffeine is right in between. So as long as caffeine is there, it breaks down in some time. The sleep pressure will no longer bother you. But the moment it goes, the sleep pressure is still there, and there will be a rush to go to bed at that time. You can have one more cup of coffee, but that will just prolong. It will never be able to get rid of the sleep pressure. So at the moment that effect of coffee is gone or effect of tea is gone, you are bound to go back to bed, and because of to release the sleep pressure to get the adenosine back down. So these are the two processes, and that's how they interact. So sleep pressure goes up during the day, and then when you fall asleep, it goes back down. And circadian rhythms, which through melatonin, which are essentially going signaling at what time of day you should fall asleep. Both these processes are quite well synchronized, and that's the reason why generally in the night you start feeling asleep. And once you go to bed and take about 7 to 8 hours of sleep, the next day you can go back to whatever you would like to do. But if you travel from one country to other country or one continent to other continent, the circadian rhythms are no longer able to predict when it's going to be dark, when it's going to be night, because the time is now all over the place. Your system thinks that it's going to be light cycle, but it's dark cycle. So this kind of goes all over the place, but your sleep pressure is still building up. That's the reason you experience jet lag-like phenotype. And it's recommended that if you take melatonin, that eases up, because melatonin will start getting your cycles back in order, right? So let's now talk about how would we characterize sleep. There was this one question, what is sleep? Even though behaviorally we can define if someone is lying down with their eyes closed, we generally would say that they are sleeping, but that's not how in science we would like to do things. There needs to be more robust criteria on which we would define sleep. And before we go into that, I would like to talk about the work of these two gentlemen here, which first time gave us an idea what sleep actually looks like. So before their work, sleep was generally considered as one long unconscious stage. So you fall asleep and then you wake up. There was no stages in between. But as Eugene, who was a graduate student in Nathaniel Kleitman's lab at the University of Chicago, they first time looked at sleep through various different parameters. They were studying sleep in infants. So they generally, newborn babies tend to sleep for longer periods of time than adults. So when they were looking at sleep, what they found was these newborn infants at certain stages during their sleep starts moving their eyes, darting side to side, even though their eyelids were closed. Inside, they could observe that those eye was making a movement side to side. And this used to happen for a few hours. And then again, the movement will stop. But then after a few hours, again, the movement will start. It seems that it's cyclical. For a few minutes or hours, the movement will stay, and then it will come back again in a few hours. So based on that, they thought that sleep might be different across the whole night. It may not be a monolith unconscious state. And based on that, they defined two different sleep stages. Not surprisingly, rapid eye movement, where the eye is making movements under the eyelid, and non-rapid eye movement, where there is no movement. So based on that, these two broad stages of sleep was first defined. This was in early 1950s. And later studies also pointed out that the non-REM stage can further be divided into various stages, at least 3 more. So to understand whether someone is sleeping and what that sleep might look like, even in terms of stages, we generally use these EEG caps. So the patient will just put these caps on their head. It has small electrodes which will measure the neural activity changes. which can then be amplified and processed to look at how the brain activity changes are happening when you are falling asleep or when you are awake. Okay. So this is what it looks like. So when you're awake, there's a lot of wiggly lines, which indicates that your brain is really active. It's processing a lot of information. That's what it looks like. But the moment you transition to first stage of a non-REM sleep, there's a general calmness. The activity levels in the brain has decreased significantly, and which is generally true across all three non-REM stages. But if you then move into REM stage, which is this rapid eye movement stage of sleep, again, these lines are coming back in the picture, indicating that your brain is really active. So even though you're sleeping, your brain is really active. And this is where you experience majority of your dreaming. So this was first discovered that the REM sleep is where dreaming is happening, and that might be the reason for this really active brain. Yes.
It looks like the whatever stage 3 delta has some white screen as well.
Yeah, those are so the amplitude is increasing, but overall the frequency is more or less similar across. So they do have different types of delta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, but you can still distinguish between what is happening in non-REM stages versus what is happening in REM or awake stage. Okay, so when you fall asleep, you essentially enter first into non-REM lighter stages and then transition into non-REM deeper state sleep. Generally, typical people spend about a couple of hours in this particular stage throughout the night, and then, but cyclically, they also transition to REM sleep. So a typical cycle like this is about 90 to 120 minutes long. So within that time, you're transitioning from non-REM's lighter stages, deeper stages, and then REM stage. A healthy human who is sleeping for about 7 to 8 hours of sleep will go through about 5 to 6 such cycles across the night. But if you look at it a little more closely, what you will observe is during first half of the night, most of the sleep is concentrated in the deeper non-REM stages, right? And towards the latter half of the night, most of the sleep is in the dreaming stage or the REM stage. So if you go to bed at 12 and wake up at 7 or 8, if you, for some reason, ended up waking at 5, you are actually missing out on the dream sleep or the REM sleep. That's why some of you who wake up due to the call of your alarm clock are still not able to distinguish between whether you are in a dream stage or coming back to awake state because of the dream-like sleep that you are engaging in during that time. Also, if you go to bed later in the night, like 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., you are missing out on this deeper deeper non-REM state sleep, which is really important for your brain to maintain its homeostasis. So, irrespective of whether you are going to bed late or waking up early, you're missing out on different stages of sleep. So the effects of this, the consequences of missing out on sleep are also different because functionally they are serving different aspects of the biology. So that's what should come out, I think, hopefully. So some of the functions of this sleep can be, yes. Yeah. This one? Oh, slide before. This one? So this is various stages of sleep. Okay, so stage 1 of non-REM, stage 2 of non-REM, stage 3 of non-REM, and then REM.
I think the question is, what are
Oh, okay. So this is brain activity, right? We are measuring the changes in so frequency, amplitude with the help of these tiny electrodes. We're just measuring that. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to predict. People have tried to go back, like based on your activity, can we predict what you're thinking? But it does signal that, of course, whatever your brain activity is a result of whatever is going on, consciously or unconsciously. Your thoughts are part of it. But how that would translate into how the brain activity looks like, that's hard to say. So, and yes. So the question is, why sleepwalking or talking in sleep, why such phenotypes come into the picture? So if you think about what is happening in REM sleep, you're dreaming, right? Brain is really active. At the same time, there are certain mechanisms that are controlling your other parts of the body so that you're in paralysis mode, so that you're not acting out your dream. Now, if that connection is broken for some reason or because of some illness or disease, you will start acting out on those dreams, even though you are staying at one place or walking. You're essentially taking the whatever is happening in the dream and acting out, and that might be the reason why you're talking in your sleep or why even sleepwalking is happening. Yeah. Yeah.
How does our body know how to wake up after a certain period of time? Or is that really a thing that our body
Like if you all okay, sorry. So the question is, how would you your body know when to go to sleep and when to wake up? So as I showed, there are two different mechanisms. One is based on circadian rhythms and the other is sleep pressure. These two processes combine to tell your brain that it's time to fall asleep and it's time to wake up. Yeah. So if we are following a certain clock, going to bed at certain periods of time and waking up at, so you will not need an alarm clock to tell you that it's time to wake up. You will wake up on your own. Yeah. But if
magic habit of falling or is just our body falling?
so because of these two processes, if your sleep pressure, if you're not falling asleep on those times again and again, also not getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, then it will be hard for your body to predict these aspects. But if you're falling asleep on certain times and also getting enough sleep, then it generally knows when to go to sleep and when to wake up. Yeah.
Is it just the amount of these two chemicals you said that decide when to sleep and when to wake up?
Of course, there are much more things happening, but they are the most important ones. So if these are not working properly, you will not be able to get to sleep and wake up. Mm. Generally, like the light from screen is harmful to your sleep patterns because the circadian rhythms that I showed you, the melatonin secretion, if blue light, which generally what screens are throwing up, they would affect that secretion. They would affect melatonin. They would affect circadian rhythms. So that will affect where your system's ability to predict when to go to sleep. So that sleep onset itself is affected. But the sleep pressure is building up still, right? The adenosine is still going up. Even though your circadian rhythm is no longer able to say when to fall asleep because you're shining lights all the time and the light dark cycles are all over the place, but your sleep pressure is still there. So when you do finally go to sleep, it might be that the higher adenosine levels is just pushing you into that deeper stage. Yeah. Oh, these are again stages for non-REM stage 1, 2, 3. So stage 3 is the deeper one, and stage 1 is the lighter sleep. Yeah.
How does past traumas affect our sleep cycle?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a really complicated question. Yeah. So I'll talk about sleep function. Some of it is related to the, so the question is how past trauma affects sleep. Some of it is related to that because of the functions that sleep is serving, but it can also exacerbate some of those diseases or some of those effects. So we'll maybe by the end of this, you will get more idea, but we can definitely come back to it. Yeah, yeah. How will you skip non-REM? Yeah, as I said, if you go sleep later in the night, it would generally be that you have skipped all the non-REM and gone straight to, you will still get some non-REM. It will never be that you will directly start in REM sleep, but the transitions will be shorter. Earlier in the night, the transitions are longer. So because of that, those you will just remember those dreams rather than falling asleep. All of them. Like we cannot, so it's not possible. So the question is, which are the essential stages? So it's not possible to go to deeper non-REM without going through these two lighter sleep stages. And it's not possible to go to REM without going through all these cycles. So it would be hard to just pick and choose which and only sleep for that period of time, thinking that you can get only that stage. But all these stages are serving some or the other purpose. So that's why it would be advisable, recommended to at least get 7 to 8 hours so that all these stages can be covered. Typically, it would be hard for your brain to get straight into. So if you look at the activity cycles of these different sleep stages, right? So during this stage, it's already really active. So from there, going like this, it will not serve any purpose for the brain, right? These stages help your brain to calm down, to keep those activities low, to reduce the energy burden, etc. And once it has gone through all these stages, then it can come back to a little bit active stage where you're dreaming. Yeah. Yeah. So it's evolutionary. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, keep forgetting that. The question is, why do some animals sleep more versus less, and whether this has anything to do with their neurobiology and physiology? Of course, neurobiology and physiology will contribute to that, but evolutionarily, as I was just pointing to you, these herbivores versus carnivores. So the type of environment and context they are growing up in, and the habitat that they are living in, all those factors determine how much sleep that they are able to obtain. Yeah, and we will also come to the aspect when they are unable to obtain that sleep. So these are not hard and fast cycles. It's not like they have to sleep for 22 hours. They can change. And even in the case of horses, they don't have to stick to just 2 hours. It changes. But again, it depends on the context in which they are in.
Maybe you should allow you to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So some of those sleep functions are listed here. I will be talking a little bit about cognitive functions today, specifically learning and memory. But sleep is also important for behaviors like attention. It helps you fight infection. In fact, all the vaccines that we are taking, if we are not showing proper sleep after taking vaccination, the effect that it builds up immunity is significantly reduced. That's why most of the vaccines to kids, they can sleep longer, helps. But in adults, now since with COVID, we all have to take vaccines. Not sleeping properly is not going to help you with those vaccines. It also helps your heart health and muscle health, and also helps you to break down food that you're eating to generate energy. So let's start with these cognitive functions and learning and memory specifically. For the longest period of time, sleep was considered as a useless state. People didn't think that it was serving any purpose. But those ideas began to change more recently. But even during that time, there were people who were making note of the effective power of sleep, right? Here, a Roman educator, Quintilinus, observed that things which could not be recalled on the spot are easily coordinated the next day. And time itself, which is generally accounted one of the causes of forgetfulness, was actually strengthening memory. So even though he's not directly referring to sleep, but whatever event is happening during the night is helping you to remember things which you were not able to recall the last day. Even with these insights, for the first experimental proof that sleep might play some role in memory consolidation only came in 1924, just about 100 years from today. So here, researchers took a bunch of students and asked them to memorize certain nonsense syllables. So these are formed by the same characters, but do not make sense in terms of our English vocabulary. So after that, they were either allowed to sleep or they were kept awake. So what they found was if they were allowed to sleep, their ability to recall these nonsense syllables was pretty high. But if they were kept awake, there was a significant drop in their ability to recall these syllables. So essentially what they showed was once they learn these nonsense syllables, if they go to sleep, the next day they're able to recall it. But if they are kept awake, they are unable to recall those nonsense syllables, indicating that something sleep was doing, which is helping them to to remember those syllables that they learned the day before. So even with these sort of experiments, and there are many more experiments like this, not only in humans, but in other animals, there was still a lot of debate because we were still not able to understand how this might be happening, how sleep is helping memories to remain stable or even get better. So for that, I would like to talk a little bit about these set of studies. So this is a little tricky, so bear with me. And if you have any questions, please ask them. So in the brain of mammals, rats, humans, etc., there's a small region called hippocampus. And that region is required for learning and memory. In that same region, there are certain cells which are called place cells. And they essentially become active whenever you visit a certain place. So if there's a box and we put a rat in it, if it is visiting the corners versus edges versus center, different place cells will become active, giving it a spatial map of whatever is around it. Yeah. Something similar might happen to you in your own apartment. Even in darkness, you can navigate a little bit because your place cells are becoming active and letting you know where exactly in your apartment you might be. Yeah. So the simplest form of this experiment was they placed electrodes in the head of these rats to record activity of neurons in the region of hippocampus, place cells essentially. So when they visited circle A, neuron 1 will become active. Circle B, neuron 2 will become active, and circle C, neuron 3 will become active. Now, this is what they are experiencing when they are awake. When they go to sleep, what they observed was those same neurons were again becoming active. So as you can see, even though they are staying at the same place now, neuron 1, 2, 3 are becoming active. The same neurons that were active when they were awake. The other thing was this was happening sequentially. So here they are visiting A first, B, and then C, and the neural activity is following it. Neuron 1 is becoming active first, then neuron 2, then neuron 3. So in a way, whatever they experienced during when they were awake was getting replayed when they are asleep. Okay, and this replay of events experienced during awake is what might be behind learning and memory, or the role of sleep in learning and memory. So if we try to break down this symmetry, we try to break down this replay, your ability to form memories is getting hampered. Yeah. So Now, let's ask the second question, an alternate question here. What will happen if we artificially activate these? Will now you be able to remember better? Yeah. So this is what the researchers did next. So here they are taking help of smell, odors. So we all might be aware of the power of smell to help us go back in time, recall past events such that we are transported completely there. So they use that power of smell to train subjects. So here the training is with respect to where the spatial location of the picture card. And at the same time, they are being exposed to the smell of either lemon or mint. Okay. When they go to sleep, even though they are sleeping, the same smell which they experienced during training is getting, they are getting re-exposed to that with the idea that this smell might be able to reactivate the memory, whatever they formed during training. And when they tested them the next day, the subjects that got lemon associated with this particular training were able to recall effectively the position of hammer in the picture card, but were not able to recall the position of the bear because with bear, a different smell was getting exposed. So I'm not suggesting to students here to have some smell and while you're studying and then turn it on while you're going back to sleep. It may help, it may not help, I don't know. But what this effectively suggests that there might be memory reactivation happening during sleep, which can help you to form these new memories or at least keep them stable for enough period of time. So most of these experiments were done in mammals, humans, rats, etc. But still, we are not able to understand molecularly what is behind sleep's role in memory. So these replay experiments do suggest some role, but how this replay is actually triggered, what are the different aspects of it which are getting involved, chemicals, molecules, etc. We don't know that well about those things. So to study that, we actually use a very different model system in our lab, fruit flies, Drosophila melanogaster. So the great thing about this system is that you can manipulate every aspect of their biology, the genetic aspect, the neurobiology aspect, and then see how that affects their ability to learn, ability to sleep, etc. But of course, the audience who are not well versed with the system, the first question would be, do flies sleep? And if they do sleep, are they able to form memories? So of course, we cannot see flies sleeping. Their eyelids are not closing down. They are not settling in one place. Also, we cannot put EEG caps on them. They are too small to be able to do that. But what we can do is look at the behavior criteria on which we can define sleep, right? When we are sleeping, we are generally at rest. We are in one position. Our arousal thresholds are higher. Essentially, if, as I mentioned earlier, if someone is sleeping, it will require harder, louder sound or even shaking to wake them up compared to if they are awake because of the higher arousal threshold. And if you keep yourself up all night, you will go to sleep the next day because of the pressure that sleep pressure is building up because of adenosine, right? So there is always a sleep rebound if you miss out on sleep. So based on these criteria, let's look at whether flies are able to sleep. So first, let's look at their activity. To do that, we use something called Drosophila activity monitors. Here, they are placed in these tiny little glass tubes, and there's an infrared beam going through the center. So whenever they cross through that infrared beam, the system will register that as a period of activity. So if they are not moving around, then the system will say that they are at rest. Okay. If you then plot it on a graph, you would have, so these bars, the lighter ones are the activity patterns when they are in the light period, and the darker bars during the dark period, right? They also are kept in this light-dark cycle of 24 hours. So what you can appreciate that they're really active when the lights are on and when the lights are going off, but the rest of the time they seem to be in a more relaxed or rest-like state. So if we flip this and say that whether they are sleeping. So just based on activity, what we can see is that they show an increase in sleep during the middle of the day, a siesta-like behavior, the afternoon sleep. So somehow flies are also getting that. But during the night, most of the time they are keeping asleep. So based on that, it was observed that they sleep about 16 to 17 hours every day, almost twice of what we generally get. So this was first. The second is arousal thresholds. So we again use those Drosophila activity monitors to keep flies onto a shaker. So this will essentially move with some intensity. And based on that intensity, we can determine what arousal threshold they are on, right? So if a low intensity is sufficient to make them move, that means they are not sleeping. But if it requires higher intensity of shaking to make them move, then that would be a higher arousal threshold. And if we go back to the last graph, all these stages, when they are showing a lot of sleep, their arousal thresholds are really high. So it seems that they are just not lying around. They're actually in a state which is hard to break out of. Yeah. Now let's look at the third criteria. Using the same shaker, if we will try to keep them up all night and see if that affects their sleep the next day. So this is what their normal sleep looks like. So if we now use shaker to reduce their sleep throughout the night, what we observe the next day is there is an increase in sleep. Compared to their normal sleep, you can see now they are sleeping more, right? So that's the rebound effect that we are all familiar with. So on all three aspects, it seems flies are able to show that they show some sort of sleep-like state. So I hope I'm able to convince you that they do. Now let's look at whether they form memories. So Seymour Benzer was the first person who used fly as a model systems to study behavior, to figure out the neural circuits, the genetics behind how a behavior is executed, right? Him, along with his student William Quinn, he essentially is responsible to kickstart this new field of neurogenetics. And they together were the first ones to do experiments to study whether flies can learn and remember odor smells. Okay, so the setup was really simple. They had two array of tubes which can slide past each other. Generally, flies are introduced in the bottom tubes, and they have this innate preference to climb up, to move up against gravity. So when they are introduced here, they will quickly get into these tubes. Okay. At the same time, there is this electric grid which is placed along the tube. So when they get into the tube, they will get mild electric shocks. Okay. And also they will put some sort of odor smell onto this grid. So just with the help of a brush, they will spread out some odor so that when they are getting electric shocks, at the same time, they can smell that odor. Okay. So this is a simple experiment. Introduce flies here. They will go up. When they come and experience odor smell A, they are getting electric shocks. And this happens for 1 minute. So every 5 seconds, they are getting electric shock. Then they are tapped back in and now introduced to a different smell, this time odor B. And this time, they are also not getting electric shocks. So one odor smell was paired up with electric shocks, and the other one did not. Okay. And then when they were given a choice whether to go to odor B or odor A, they preferred going to odor B. They moved away from odor A, indicating that they remembered which odor was given with electric shock, giving us the first evidence that flies can show some sort of memory-like phenotype. Now, what flies are really good at, because they are tiny, easy to grow, we can grow thousands of them in a span of 2 to 3 weeks. What we can do is to use mutagenesis on them. So mutagenesis is essentially you are damaging DNA. You are introducing some sort of chemical that will damage DNA. And since there are genes across DNA, you're damaging some of those genes. And that will affect their function. So what these experiments were to figure out which genes are responsible for ability to learn and remember. Okay, so they did large-scale mutagenesis using this particular chemical EMS or ethyl methylsulfonate, and then generated thousands of flies that have DNA damage at different locations. And then they took those flies and studied them in that same setup that I showed you. And that gave them a bunch of genes that are responsible for learning and memory. One of them is appropriately named amnesiac because they are able to learn, but their ability to keep that memory for certain amount of time is really low. So if you look at your normal flies, they learn and they remember for some time, but your amnesiac flies completely lose that memory quickly. So based on these type of experiments, they figured out what would be the genetic basis of learning and memory. And later studies showed the similar genetic pathways also involved in rats and also in humans. So that's why fly serves as a wonderful model system to figure out what exactly might be happening when you're sleeping, when you're learning, and when you're remembering. And because those things are conserved across evolution. Same genetic pathways can also be seen in humans. So the latest setups had so what setup I showed you that got modified. Now we have a team-like setup where flies are getting a choice between the two odors. And this is something similar that we use in our lab. This is what a team-A looks like today. It doesn't look like a T, but the basic principle is still the same. There are multiple chambers in which you can train flies and assess their memory. And this is what we use in our lab. Okay, now let's try to understand the role of sleep in learning and memory with flies as a system. So we can train them, as I showed you, with odors, odor smells, and punishment or reward. In this particular case, we are using reward. So instead of giving them electric shocks, we are giving them sugar. So odor along with sugar. So if they form memory, they will start preferring that odor rather than going away from it. After training them, we sleep deprive. So using again those shakers, we make them make those shakers move enough number of times so that these flies are unable to fall asleep. And then when we test their memory in the same team-A setup, what we found was their memory was significantly lower. So if we don't shake them, allow them to sleep, their memory is good. But if we shake them, it goes down. So this is what it would look like in the case of flies. Odors are equal to sugar. And if they're allowed to sleep, they're able to recall that memory. But if they are shaken up, they are sleep deprived, they are unable to form memories. So whatever I said till now with respect to sleep and learning and memory connection might be different from your own experience, day-to-day experiences, right? Children keep themselves up before exams, try to prepare as well as possible, and are able to do well in their exams the next day, even without proper sleep. So that would suggest that you can form memories without sleep, right? And also do other functions. Is it possible in other organisms? In flies, whether we see memories without sleep? So the answer is yes. If we train them in the similar fashion and sleep deprive them, but at the same time, if we keep them hungry instead of giving them food, then they are able to recall the memory that they formed. So here, the system seems to be flexible enough that if they're unable to sleep in certain conditions, they can still form memories. So these, what we characterize as sleep-independent functions, right? So there are sleep-dependent ones, and these are sleep-independent functions. And again, this is not unique to flies. Across animal kingdom, if you go, you will find similar instances. For instance, in killer whales, they generally move away from their pod to give birth. And while returning, both mother as well as newborn do not show signs of sleep, even though the newborn is constantly learning and the mother has to remember directions to go back to their pod. So they're able to function quite properly. These migratory birds, they travel long distances over months, and during that time, again, they are not showing any sleep. These seals, when they are in the laboratory condition, they sleep for about 16 to 18 hours. But when they go in the wild to forage, to find food, they sleep for as little as 30 minutes to 1 hour. So completely foregoing sleep, but still able to go to places that they remember where food will be available. So still able to form memories. Yeah.
How are the surroundings for example, the sea like place, when people
Yeah.
and the wild is
Yeah.
how surroundings dependent.
Yeah, of course. So the question is how surroundings determine sleep, and it's really relevant. The context. So a lot of external factors affect your sleep. Temperature, as I said, the availability of food. So essentially your diet. Age is another factor that affects sleep. And in these cases, it seems their inability to fall asleep in that particular time period when they are migrating or trying to find food, again affecting their sleep. So overall, what this would indicate that we can function without sleep. There are sleep independent mechanisms to allow us uh, uh, to do various tasks. But yeah. Yeah, yeah, of course. If you're not, if you're hungry, it would be hard to go to sleep. Yeah. So, so that would indicate that nature has been. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, but I would refrain from going directly in that direction to, in order to keep memories better, keep yourself hungry and stay up, right? I would not suggest that because that's what I'm coming to. Nature has provided you enough flexibility across organisms, including in humans, so that you can function without sleep in certain conditions. If you look at the last slide, there was hunger, there was migration, there was foraging, which was making with conditions in which those organisms are unable to fall asleep. And that's why they switch to a sleep independent mechanisms. But that's not our general experience, right? Our frantic lifestyles with its stresses and distractions make us forgo sleep almost on a daily basis. And that will be like breaking down the system. So, and so even though we are able to do our office work, do our school work with minimal amount of sleep, that will have consequences both in the short term as well as in the long term. So this would be the takeaway from this session. Get good sleep, 7 to 8 hours every night, go to bed at certain times, wake up at certain times. And that will help you learn and remember new experiences, fight against infection, and in the long term, keep yourself fit and healthy. Yeah, thank you.
So we'll take some on this.
Yeah, let me just see if there are any online questions. You seem to have answered. There was one which has been answered on the chat, but maybe this is still not clear. The significance of adenosine in the sleep cycle.
So, as I said, both of those systems interact with each other. Circadian rhythms, the cycles that we observe, and adenosine levels, which is building up due to sleep pressure. They are not separate from each other. They are combining together to initiate sleep in organisms, including humans. So if like the molecules responsible are different, but the end result is similar. That is the initiation, the sleep onset that we are getting.
Okay, are there any quick questions? If not, we will of course come back and have a lot more questions after that.
What? I didn't hear you. Oh, okay. Night owl, you mean in? Oh, okay. So in humans, not owls. Okay, sorry. So the question is, if night owls who generally prefer going to bed late and wake up early, so what studies are suggesting that it's not necessary that all of us are following the same circadian patterns, right? It's different, it's individual basis. So it's not like, but our society is really constructed around this idea that you need to go to work at 9 or 10 in the morning and come back and sleep in the night. So those type of ideas are now beginning to change. People are realizing that because of your circadian rhythms are different. Being a night owl is one example. You are getting enough sleep. It's just that you're sleeping at different time of day rather than in the night. So people are now recognizing this and changing work and office culture to better align with these different circadian rhythms so that people are able to work more efficiently at the times of day when they are more efficient, rather than clubbing everyone together and bringing them in the daytime or asking them to go back and sleep.
Okay, there's one more which is coming. We just finished the online ones and then we'll come back. You guys have come here, you deserve lots more time. How many genes are responsible for learning in fly as well as in?
Oh, that's a lot actually. And we are still discovering new every day. So it's not like there are a set number of genes that are doing it. Essentially, what learning is strengthening of connections between neurons, right? And there are a lot of genes that are helping in those connections being established, both in flies as well as in humans. The numbers might be different in flies because they only have about 15,000 of genes, but in humans, a lot more. But the essential process, the required genes which are doing this type of tasks are conserved.
So another question, some people can do well with shorter sleeping hours than others. Is this because of our different genetic makeup?
Yeah, so that's the other aspect. One was this night owl with circadian rhythms. The other is some people are genetically, they just sleep less and they don't feel it. Like even 3 to 4 hours of sleep is sufficient for them. And that is indeed the case. The genetics are such that, but in the long term, if they face any difficulties in their lifespan or in their survival or even their overall health, I think there are not enough studies to suggest us that. Because we generate mutants regularly in flies and we have mutants that sleep less, right? But their lifespan is significantly lower. They die quickly compared to a normal fly. But whether that is true in the case of humans where a little bit of sleep is sufficient, no large-scale studies I can recall.
All right, here's an interesting one. Does the memory acquired due to sleeping after learning, is that a long-term memory or short-term? Basically, I want to know the difference between learning overnight before the exam versus learning.
So your brain is really clever in that. It knows which memory needs to be stored in the long term and which memory needs to be discarded. So if it is only for exams that you are really interested in keeping it, it will be discarded sooner or later. But if you're really interested in something and you got that experience and form that memory, then your system knows that it is essential and it will keep it consolidated for long. So you cannot fool that easily.
You got to really like it. This odor business,
Yeah.
are there any specific fragrances for better learning?
I don't think so. There are any trials. I just talked about lemon and mint, but I'm not sure if they themselves are that good to keep memories.
Okay, I think that's the end of the online questions. So can you just stop here from me?
Sure.
Okay, so thank you online audience for watching and for all your questions. Just to remind you again, our next session, 14 days from now, 2 weeks from now, is on the world of the fungi. And a month from now over here is again going to be on the wonderful physics that you see in movies. And keep following us, keep watching us. And we're going to end the live stream here. For those of you who are here, please have some chai. We're going to come back and I'm sure you have a lot of questions on sleep and memory and exams and whatever it is. Okay, so on that note, thank you very much for watching. That's for the online audience, and thanks a lot, Nitin.
Yeah, welcome.
You can stop.